name is Kyle Cherek. I'm the host of a television show on PBS called Wisconsin Foodie, and it is my great privilege to moderate this panel for the Wisconsin Restaurant Association today. Just as a show of hands before we get into it, how many of you are restaurateurs, owners of restaurants out here in the audience? Okay. How many of you work in a separate from that, in some sort of administrative or managerial position within restaurant? Great. And then how many folks are here just because, someone said they had to be? Great. Guy in the front? Okay, good. Couple three. There's always a few. I'm going to go down the panel, and I'm going to start this discussion and let you know who's here. And we'll speak for about 45 minutes. Hopefully you find it completely engaging, and it really helps with your understanding of employee culture and how to create that within your organizations and operations. And then we'll leave about 15 minutes to questions at the end. So if you have them along the way, if you've got a pen or what have you, scribble them down because we're definitely going to open up for that. To my left is my friend Jason Ilstrup, who is currently with Downtown Madison. I know him through his years at Hotel Red as the GM. You were the founding GM there, correct?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, and it says in your bio that you were serving as the operations manager, but you created the operational systems and culture for Hotel Red.
Yes, absolutely. As general manager, as the opening general manager, I was fortunate enough to set the table and to really create the culture that is hopefully still there now. I left a couple months ago, for a new job as the president of Downtown Madison, Inc., which is a quality of life organization in downtown. Really, I'm just a great hospitalitarian for the city of Madison now instead of Hotel Red.
And that's why I wanted to pull you in, because I'd known you as a friend, and I'd been to Hotel Red many times and understood the hospitality culture there. But I learned from your bio, even though I've known you all these years, that you actually are trained and barred as a lawyer in the best way, worked in the political sphere, but before that were in the Peace Corps. So you understand people and psychology and people skills in a different way than I realized.
Yeah, actually, that's true. You actually learned that I was a lawyer just a few minutes ago, and you and I have literally known each other pretty well for almost 10 years now.
Maybe 10, yeah.
So I've hidden my law degree well.
Thank you, Jason. All right, Lacey Reichwald, just to Jason's left. Lacey was fantastic for this panel, I thought, because what I wanted was this broad spectrum of people's experience and how they've developed their own culture within hospitality. Lacey has got 2 locations called the SweetSpot in the Whitewater area? Yeah, the Whitewater area. And I found that fascinating, 1, because of all of the community accolades that she came with, but 2, because she's operating in an area where she's doing something a little bit more sophisticated that you might imagine, but more importantly, she's pulling in folks that are really just moving through the years by way of their college degrees, but she has to imbue them with this great sense of purpose, of her purpose for the SweetSpot. And that's its own talent in its own right, so I thought you'd really be a great asset. Did I get everything?
Yeah, thank you. That's true. So Whitewater is a university town. I still think that we have a wonderful turnover rate considering that we're a university town. The average employee stays with us between 3 and 4 years. And that's not a lot of time to instill a customer service culture into someone who's really there to learn how to do something else in their future. But I keep in touch with a lot of our former employees, and what I've learned over the years is that they take those skills with them onto whatever that next job is. I've now been doing it long enough that one of my former employees has been a doctor for 2 years, so I feel good about that. She stays in touch and says, I learned a lot at the SweetSpot that I use in my bedside manner as a doctor. So.
Wow, that's a huge compliment. Yeah. To Lacey's left is my friend Joe Bartolotta. He and his brother have got how many restaurants here? 16 restaurants and a few catering operations, and a great charitable enterprise called Carolotta that gives back tremendously to the community. And I've known Joe for, I think about 95 when you opened Lake Park. Yeah, they opened their first restaurant in 1993, Ristorante, now celebrating your 25th anniversary and going through a bunch of, not really remodeling, but...
And I feel all 25 years.
Well, you look good. And I've watched Joe grow their enterprise from one restaurant and then 2 navigate things like the Milwaukee County Park System and that kind of bureaucracy, be embraced by the community, and have go from just a handful of employees that some of us knew by name to I don't know how many, and still have
We're
this.
close to 1,000 right now.
Yeah.
It's a lot to manage.
And still have this terrific employee culture. I can go from your burger spot on the lake to one of your fine dining destinations and have the similar touch, but have it be tailored to where I'm at. So I thought you'd have a lot to share
that was
with us.
always the biggest challenge for us is finding people and maintaining a certain level of culture. That's all of our problems. We all share the same challenges in our businesses, and it's pretty much all centric around employees. And my father used to have an old Sicilian saying, "The fish stinks from the head." So it was hard to think, if you think about what that really means, is that the head of a fish is the leader of the fish. So if the fish is bad, then the head is bad, the whole fish is going to be bad. That's how Italians think. I don't quite understand it. But as a leader of an organization, you have to walk the walk and talk the talk. And, it's really important that you set the tone, that you care about your employees. And, we experience ridiculously low amount of turnover for as big as we are. So it's a testament to our managers and finding people who believe in the same core values that you do.
So on the far left is Kate Cristobal, and Kate is the director of cafes for a little coffee company you may have heard of called Colectivo. And it's a similar story with Joe and Paul in that I knew the original, or still do, knew the original three owners of what was then called Altera when they were three guys with a roaster and a cart in a mall. And coffee was not Uber, it was not sexy, and people didn't even know a light roast from a dark roast. And now they've grown outside of Milwaukee and into Chicago and Madison, and as you were saying before, 500 employees. And you sell a heck of a lot more than coffee. One of my favorite stories about your bakery, Troubadour, which I also think is just fantastic baked goods, was an internal meeting, and I've been given permission to share this, but where the CEO said to one of the owners, because they were just so dedicated to the bakery, but they just needed to keep fine-tuning things, he said, I just want to check, are you trying to lose money? Because he said, no, we believe in the bakery. It's coming along. Don't worry. There's a future here. But within that culture, I find Colectivo very interesting because it's a very brief exchange. Where in everybody else's, you have a longer time to touch the client, the customer through hospitality. Colectivo is very brief. And a lot of times folks walk up on their phones or they've got something on their mind and they just need to get through. But how do you embrace that culture, really, that then plays through to the client?
Well, we've found that we really have to read our customers because, yes, sometimes we have 30 seconds with someone, but sometimes we have 6 hours with someone as well. And sometimes they come to us for, let's be honest, a fix. They need that coffee in the morning, but sometimes they want to learn about coffee. And so we have to be sort of all things to them, and we have to be able to read what their needs are right there in that moment. So we teach a lot of observation.
So I want to begin all this with one quote from the great restaurateur Danny Meyer. Many of you may have heard of him. He's got some really terrific restaurants in New York and the kind of a moderately successful burger chain called Shake Shack. It's moderately. It's literally traded on the New York Stock Exchange. But a quote of his that I've always loved, that I actually had on my desk for a while, is the overarching concern to do the right thing well is something we can't train for. It's either there or it isn't. And I believe that's true, but you all encounter that and you all encounter that on a day-to-day basis. So if it is either there or it isn't, how do you choose those people when, say, you're opening up Harbor House and you need 150 people, or a new cafe and you need, I don't know, however many, 60, or you have your cafe where there's just 3 or 4, or at the hotel and you've got maybe too little or too many applicants, but you want to get the ones that have painted themselves red. How do you make those choices?
Well, in our case, we have a word, and whether I invented it or not, it's called sparkle. And to me, I try to hire people with sparkle. You know, I can teach anybody to do anything, but like Danny alludes to, and we've believed it for years, is that I can't teach you to be a good person. You know, so either you have the heart, the hospitality heart is what we call it, to want to extend yourselves for the benefit of others, and you know, typically in an interview, you can find out pretty quickly within a few minutes whether somebody has that special sparkle, you know. And there are times when we've done mass hirings, and I'll be honest, we've looked at people and just out of sheer numbers had to hire people if they could fog up a mirror or they had a pulse. You know, sometimes we had to make those decisions.
It's amazing I haven't worked for you at some point,
Yes,
because
yes.
I've
I was
got
going to
both.
say,
I can do
I should
both.
apply for a job.
There you go. No, but that becomes a greater challenge for us, because at that point we have to take that person and mold them into something that fits our culture, and that's sort of the challenges of the new workforce right now, is finding people who years ago it was a little bit easier, but today just finding that spark, gravitate towards sparkle.
Kate?
Since we have less time, we actually call it a spark. Do they have the spark? So,
You heard that here first. That's really great.
so we are looking for people that are kind, that we think will be gracious, that we think have empathy. And we're also looking for people who are energetic and bright and thoughtful. So, but we do distill it down to that one word, and we say, do they have that spark? We've all said in that interview where you ask someone why they applied with us, and they say, well, I have to pay my rent. That's, yeah.
Should not be the main motivating
right.
factor to
But-
be here behind this counter.
But some of the answers that we get are just amazing, and so many people say, I've been a customer here, and I've always had great experiences. Right. And that is one of the things that really drives us and helps us to understand when we get that kind of feedback from people how we're doing. It's great.
A couple of things that I really enthusiastically believe what they say is energy and empathy. Those are two really important things. You really can't train energy, right? I mean, they either have it or they don't. And empathy is probably something that has taken a lifetime to gain. So those are two things. But the one that I think in the hotel business was very important for us was something called emotional intelligence. So these are people that can read what is happening very quickly. And in fact, Kate was mentioning we train it in the hotel business usually with personality traits to understand who you're talking to and who you're working with as the guest at the hotel or in the cafe. If the person has high emotional intelligence and can read a situation and understand what is going on in even just a 30-second transaction, or Joe probably has a 2-hour transaction, I have sometimes a week-long transaction with guests. If they have high emotional intelligence and they can read what is happening and what that guest needs even before they do in a proactive way, they're going to go a long way. And if you interview and you ask the right questions, you can figure out what their level of emotional intelligence is and how far they're going to go.
Absolutely, and we even start that before the interview process. Part of our application is, why do you want to work here? And I skip right over any application that doesn't have a good response to that question. And I do think that things have been getting harder. About 10 years ago, when I was doing all of the interviewing myself, I think it was about 50% of applicants had that spark or that sparkle, and I wanted to get to know them more. I feel like now it's maybe 1 in 20. Part of that is my own standards have gone up, but part of it is just there seems to be more of that, I just need a job. And usually that's where I end the interview. If I feel that there's a gut connection with someone, then I might change it to, tell me what you're passionate about. And then you can kind of find out, are they just nervous? Are they not connecting with me right away? But if they can start talking about something that they're passionate about and start to open up, then you might be able to see that sparkle, because that sparkle to me, I'm going to start using that word. I'm sorry. Thank you. For us, that's that initiative. If they don't have something behind their eyes that lights them up, they're not going to take the initiative when they see a customer looking at their coffee cup. They're just going to walk the other way instead of going up to that customer and saying, hey, is there something I can do for you? Or how are you enjoying your coffee? What can I do for you? That initiative comes from some kind of inner drive and passion to excel, to do well.
So you've got that great group. You've got those key people. You're moving along, and to really put it in, I mean, your business is its own living entity, right? A restaurant, a cafe, a bakery, a hotel. It's its own living thing, if we're really honest about it. And then, of course, you've got employees, and they're alive. Well, and they've got lives outside, and then they have their living entity within this experience, which is really, it's what Danny Meyer and so many others talk about, is that it's that sense of existential relation, really, with someone that's come in, that's chosen your place above all the other options. How do you then counteract and rebalance that fatigue that we all feel from being nice? I mean, even if you have that sparkle, the spark, the what have you, the emotional intelligence, it gets tiring. I've talked to chefs about that, where they're putting out all day, they come home, they feed 200 people, but they come home empty. And I know servers and cafe folks and hoteliers, and so we all experience it. So how do you rebalance that for your people within your culture so they can come back tomorrow?
I think one of the key things is understanding early, right at the beginning of the process, what is the motivation for your employee? Why are they there? They may be there to work in the hotel business. They want to work their way up. At UW or in Whitewater, let's be honest, they're there to go to university. And so there may be ways to motivate them based on that. If I can train them how to show up to work on time, how to do the basics of a professional life. I mean, I have got people that used to work at Hotel Red. Our shuttle driver right now is a PhD student in microbiology.
Great guy, by the way.
He is. Camardo Henry, wonderful
Also
guy.
Terrifically funny.
But his motivation is not to work at Hotel Red. That's not why he's in Madison. But his motivation is twofold. One, to go to school, but two, to meet people. So if you put him in a position where he can meet more people, aka a shuttle driver, he's much more likely to succeed. So early on, understanding what their motivation is and how you can facilitate that to let them grow to whatever they want to be. If it's a zoologist or they want to continue in the restaurant business, understanding motivation is a really important part of getting employees to keep that energy level up.
Yeah, at the SweetSpot in Whitewater, because it is such a small community and a tight-knit community, and so many of our employees are coming from outside of the community, I really try to make it known from the beginning, you are expected to assimilate into this community. And that's not like a you will do this, but more of a I promise you that you will get more joy out of this job if you get to know the people who come in. I mean, in a coffee shop and cafe environment, we're very lucky. We get to know our customers. We have regulars that we see every day. And they really become a part of the lives of our staff, and we'll congratulate them on exams. One of our employees is a music major, and two of our customers went to see her performance last week, and those are the kinds of experiences that our employees have that I think keep them going and keep them motivated. And then I also think it's important that accolades don't stop at me. I hear a lot of great things at my staff or about my staff throughout the community. Someone will run into me and say, Jenna gave me great service the other day. That's Jenna right there. And it's really important for us to make sure that that gets passed down the line, that it doesn't stop at us and we don't, oh, we're doing such a good job because Jenna did a great job for me. No, Jenna did a great job. She needs to hear that.
Joe, Kate, anything to add?
Well, you know, one of the things that we talk about often with newer coworkers is they have to take care of themselves because they have to be to work at 5 a.m. And we give away free coffee all day long. So if you don't get enough sleep, you're overtired, and you come to work at 5 a.m. and just drink a lot of coffee, it's real that you're not maybe going to be as gracious. And so we talk about that. We don't take for granted that that's a thing. And I even got the talk when I first started because you don't realize how much coffee you might be consuming. And something that was a very small problem got a lot bigger for no reason other than caffeine. So we talk about that, and we make sure that we're planning our shifts so people do get breaks and they do get to eat, and we don't schedule clopens. We're very careful about taking care of our employees in that way. And if someone's having a bad day, we might, we'll take them out of the customer view to do some backstocking and maybe work a little more in the kitchen. So,
Just a couple points. The restaurant industry, as I think we all know, is sort of a unique blend of personalities and people. We have found that there's a lot of individuals in our company who have gone to college, procured degrees, can't find work in their field, and end up falling back on the restaurant industry. And some of my best and brightest people are highly degreed, highly educated, but for some reason get caught in this, I don't want to call it a trap, but it works for us, this cycle where they work 5-6 hours a night, they can make $30 an hour maybe, if they do well in tips or more. And, I see a lot of our servers get in that groove. And it's important to understand that the skills that they learn and acquire working in the restaurant business are skills that they will take with them for the rest of their lives. So, you alluded to it earlier in that when a pharmaceutical comes in and makes an offer to my server to go sell pharmaceuticals, which happens often, they're doing it because they see the sparkle that we did, and they know that they've dealt with stressful situations, working one-on-one, handling the needs of the guest, and those people make great salespeople. And so the tools that you learn in our industry are just unprecedented. And too often today, as part of our hiring problems, is the young people coming into our industry have lost some of the social skills that are required to be a success. They spend all this time looking at their phones and can't actually have a discussion face to face. And so we have some obstacles, but I think the key is that we've found is continue to cultivate people and give them tools, show them a road to success and a path to success, and they'll stay with you a lot longer.
To get back to that sort of what keeps people energized and how you keep people going, because the one negative with the hotel business is we were literally open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? So multiple people are working at all times. And you may not know, but where I used to work, Hotel Red, is directly across the street from Camp Randall Football Stadium. So we would have these massive football games. I'm talking thousands, if not tens of thousands of people through our doors, and how you keep people motivated.
Not always on their best behavior either. I'm just going to put that out there.
No. They do like their beverages. The key, though, for me, that always worked to keep people motivated is what I did, right? So you can probably already tell I'm a bit of an Energizer bunny, and I am someone that believes by leading by example, right? And so when it's really getting rough, and you know what, I've got to clean up a situation in the bathroom, I'm the one that's going to go do it. If there's extra dishes piling up and the dish crew is doing an amazing job already, but they need that extra oomph, it's me that's going to do that, take care of that situation. And I think you'll see that in a lot of your restaurants and taverns and bars, that will go a very long way to motivate people. Maybe not in that immediate, but it will later on when they're tired. I saw Jason, take off his sport coat and go to work. And it's all of our jobs to make sure that the guest is happy. That, to me, was a tactic it's not a tactic, it's actually what I believe in, that really does motivate people and keeps their energy level up.
One of my favorite restaurateurs is a guy that has a couple of spots here in Milwaukee, Carl Kopp, Custard Places, and The Best Custard. And then Elsa's, and then he's got a restaurant in New York and one in Phoenix. And it was years ago when I went in looking for him, and I was in my 20s, and he was, and I don't suggest this for every restaurateur, but he was in the kitchen helping clean out the grease traps. And I flat out said to him, because I was in my 20s, what the hell are you doing? And he said, well, I mean, it's my grease. And I don't want ever to ask anyone to do anything that they haven't seen me already do. Lift a chair over his head to get it, for the dining room, clean out an ashtray, what have you. And I don't think you have to take it to that level every day. but when things got to that level, and I think that's one really vital way. But as we all know in the hospitality industry, so it's this lovely word that came from Latin that meant both host and guest. And I've always adored how things evolve, especially within the culinary spectrum, because the words that we use every day say so much about our culture. So it's this great word that brings the two together. But people can be really mean to our employees and to our staff. And it really often has nothing to do with them. So how do you turn those moments around for them? How do you take, when they're really just doing their job to the best of their abilities? How do you take that moment and keep them engaged, because you want them to stay? You don't want them to say, I can't work in this cafe any longer. It was that kind of customer.
We work really hard at talking about a fundamental belief that we have, which is that people are good. And I know that sounds very
Pollyanna.
simple. It does. But we believe, and we say it often, and when we talk about that, if we do have a particularly difficult customer we talk about them having a bad day. And hopefully what we did will help their day be better. But we don't go behind a door and talk about our customers in a negative way. We look at ourselves and say, was there something that we did that made this situation go sideways? But we talk about our beliefs that people are good very frequently. And if you work in the coffee industry, for example, sometimes there's a customer that will come in, order 2 shots of latte or 2 shots of espresso on ice in an extra large cup. And we all know what's going to happen. They're going to go to the stir station and they're going to add milk, and they just saved a little bit of money. And our belief...
Wow, really?
So I've taught you all something. There go my profitability. But what we learned is that there's a reason that they're doing that, and we will happily sell you 2 shots of espresso from now until the end of time. And we will do it and not judge. And it makes it frictionless for the coworker. They don't have to worry about trying to protect the business because that person's getting a little extra milk, and it makes the customer feel good too.
On the flip side of that, I've actually fired customers, and I think thanks to my brother, we came up with a great line. Please don't ever give us the opportunity to ever disappoint you again. So you got to think about it for a moment.
That's
Please don't give us the opportunity to ever disappoint you again. And it's multiple offenses, but when they become abusive to your employees, and some people are, you gain a lot of points also by supporting your employees, and standing up for them. And I had one recently, and there was a huge cheer in the restaurant when I told them that, you're just not welcome here anymore. I'm sorry. You've just abused my staff to the point where I can't allow it to happen anymore. And because you told me not to come back, I said, yeah, I am. There's plenty of other steakhouses. So, so you never want to do that, but it's important to support your employees. That's a really big thing.
a big cultural thing, so they know that when it really comes to it, you're on their side. Yeah.
Well, the guest is the most important person, but your employees are your guests too. They don't own the business. They may stay longer than your customers, a few years, but they're your guests, and they are absolutely your number one priority because they're going to take care of the rest of the guests. And I think your team has to know that you have their back. I've also fired customers. I've said we want to make sure that our customers are completely satisfied. And since you can't be satisfied, I'm not sure that you're the right customer for us. Usually, though, it's after some sort of abuse. It starts with "please stop swearing at my employee," and then ends with "you can now leave." And that's really important. I've worked in places in the past where I felt like the customer's word was the end-all and be-all, and I had to take the abuse silently, and that wasn't a good feeling. And I think that your team will stick it out longer if they know that you have their back.
First thing I got to say, the customer's not always right. I hope we can all agree to that in this room.
I think you're safe in this room.
Unless it's me. what I would say is that when it doesn't get to that full extreme, and I agree completely, I've had to evict guests in hotels. I had to do it all with police, without police. The key, though, for me, if you have a difficult guest, it's difficult but not maybe risen to that level. The most important thing, and this is really difficult for me personally, is to listen, to truly listen to what that person is saying. And sometimes they're saying one thing, but they mean another. Sometimes they say one thing, and it's something else in their life that is causing them to take it out on the server. And if they don't get to that level where they need to be removed, really listening to understand what that is and taking time to just listen, that'll go a long way of disarming the person and talking them back a little bit, and then you can figure out what's actually happening and then figure out a solution. And we have in the hotel business, some of my most problem guests, we had a major incident a couple of years ago, and I would never have come back to the hotel if it would have happened to me. I was able to listen to that person, understand what was going on, and they've now become one of our best guests. So it can turn itself around, that the most negative situation can become a real positive, and it's how you handle the situation. And the best way to start is to listen.
Well, and I think empowering your staff at every level to handle those situations so that they can turn that situation around. It doesn't have to be, hold on, let me call my manager. Any single one of our baristas knows that they can listen and solve the problem, and that I'm not going to come back and say, I can't believe you gave them a free coffee. I'm going to say, good job diffusing that situation and turning a bad situation into a happy customer.
So I've got another, thank you. I've got another Danny Meyer quote, and I think the response is a little bit more from Kate and Joe, only because you have different concepts in your restaurant, Joe, you and Paul do. And Kate, your cafes, though they're all serving Colectivo coffee, they're their own little entities. They have their own personalities. So he had this great statement where he said, you can write service style in a manual. You cannot write hospitality style in a manual. Service should be one size fits all, whereas style is one size fits one. So, and please, Jason and please, either of you jump in if, Lacey, if you feel you've got stuff to add. But when you're adding in concepts, and I know this is something that we've heard from the Wisconsin Restaurant Association, that a lot of you are moving into second restaurants or tertiary restaurants or new concepts, or putting a bar into one area, changing up your mix a little bit to stay relevant. When you add in that new concept, you might have someone, say at the steakhouse, that would be ideal at Harbor House, and you want to move them over, but you also don't want to hurt the rest of the team's feelings. Do you see what I'm getting at? How do you keep the culture alive when you've got folks that are particular identities for those new locations or concepts? You can't play favorites, but still you have to serve the business.
I'll take a stab at this. I'm not fully understanding the question. I think where you're going with this is, so we have a portfolio of restaurants that are all a little bit different from each other.
Right.
And so we have North Point Custard, which is a seasonal operation on the lakefront that does burgers and custards. And we have one at the airport. And so very different. We have a couple of cafeterias, employee dining cafeterias, one at Kohl's and one at the U.S. Bank. We have catering facilities. We have fine dining restaurants. We have a gastropub on Water Street. They're all a little bit different, but the level of hospitality and the level of customer engagement should be the same, no matter what type of operation you're running. Even at North Point, although they're coming up and ordering burger and a fries and a malt, we have to be hospitable. We have to be responsive. We have to get the food to them in an appropriate amount of time that's hot and fresh, and the fries are crispy and beautiful, and we buy a high quality fry, use a high quality burger patty. Would people really know that? But we know that.
Right.
And our employees, we use Black Angus, patties at a beach shack, and we probably wouldn't have to do that.
But when you've got someone at North Point, for instance, that really you see them and you think, God, they'd be perfect at Lake Park. I can't even explain it. How do you move them within the company without offending the gang that stays at North Point?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's probably some legitimacy to that. I know that it helps a little bit because it's a seasonal business, and we close our doors after Labor Day, so we have 20 people that we can move into our restaurants.
Yeah.
But when we
from
do
burgers
transfer,
to fine dining is a
yeah,
different.
when we do transfer people from place to place, that's a real motivator for people to come to work initially, even for our company, because you can stay within our company for 5, 6, 8, 10 years and have different experiences in each restaurant. You can learn Italian food and a seafood restaurant, a steakhouse, a French restaurant. So that helps us, maintain who we have in our business because we have the ability to move and transfer people internally a lot. And what we're doing is we're really trying to move culture around sometimes because once you've trained them in one unit, then the transition should be pretty easy. You're not bringing an outside person in because they already understand the culture. So the fits are a little bit quicker, a little bit easier.
Yeah.
You probably experience that.
Yeah, and when you hire bright people, they want to continue to learn too. So they seek out other opportunities as well. So you might look at them and think, oh, they would be really great at this cafe, or they would be an amazing trainer. Part of our job is to let them know the paths that they can take. And we spend a lot of time talking about that. When we're training people, we discuss like, oh, this is how I got here. And we publish any opportunities, any employment opportunities to the company first before we go outside. So people are often looking at what else is available and they move themselves.
Jason, or Kate, Lacey, excuse me, you have insight on this?
I don't, and as someone that works in politics, usually I love every single question that gets asked of me, but I do not have an answer for this one.
I like it.
I'll just reiterate a little bit that there's a lot of self-selection that seems to go on when, so we have 2 locations and sometimes someone is a better fit at one location than the other, but more often than that, it's about moving people up. And so you may have a great server that you want to move into a managerial position and they tend to self-select. One of the things that I have learned is sometimes it doesn't benefit your business to take your best server and put them in a supervisory role because maybe they are a great server because they love that contact with customers and they really thrive off of that. And then when you move them into a supervisory role where they have less one-on-one time with the customers, they tend to flounder. And just because you're really good at something doesn't mean that you're great at supervising it or training it. So making sure that when you do move people around that they have the aptitude for that position. It's like we don't want to take our best baker and turn that person into a manager where they're never baking cakes again. They wouldn't thrive and the business wouldn't thrive.
I do have something to say. I take that back. I want to get on my soapbox here, and this is coming from the worst guy because I just left hospitality. You know what? One of my biggest pet peeves about the restaurant and the hotel business is that people look at customer service jobs as they're not careers. And let me just be very clear that when you decide to work in a restaurant or own a restaurant or be a server or work in a hotel, that is a career and it is a noble career. The science of customer service and working with guests, not everyone has that. Not everyone can be trained in that. And you should be proud of what you're doing. It's not a secondary career, even if you are going to university to be a microbiologist. It is a career that offers so many rewards. And in America right now, where we are at low unemployment and we're all struggling to find jobs, this is an area where people can still work their way up. I mean, I know countless general managers in hotels that don't have a college degree that work their way up from the laundry room to the general manager position and into ownership. This is a one career arc that I still see that the American dream is still available. If you work hard, you can really rise up. And I want to make sure that people understand that this is a profession. And yes, I did just get out of it a few weeks ago, but really, I'm still in hospitality. I just do it on a larger level for a whole downtown area. I mean, there's really no difference. And Joe brought it up, and Kate brought it up. The skills that we learn in these jobs are applicable to every career. And so let's have fun in hospitality and be proud of your jobs.
So,
one other problem that opportunity that we've uncovered is that oftentimes in our business, we can't promote fast enough. because we just don't have openings. And the people want to climb that ladder quickly, and if they sense a logjam or there's no upward mobility, you run the risk of losing them too. So it's important to keep your ear to the ground and really identify, your A team and make sure you keep checking in with them often, because there's a lot of opportunities out there. Literally, they could walk down the street and get jobs almost anywhere they want. So it's an important thing. And if you've got long-term managers in place who you sense are just not going to go anywhere, they're going to say, well, what do you got for me? If you got nothing, then it plants the seed about maybe moving on.
How do you, I think one more question and answer this one however you all feel is best, but how do you keep the culture going? We all think about employee cultures, that exchange between the server and the guest, or at the counter, or what have you, or when they check into the hotel or check out. How do you keep the culture going when the lights aren't on? Do you know what I mean? When it isn't showtime, but throughout the meetings and the prep and the rest of the day and so forth.
I immediately thought, how do you keep the music playing? Yeah, I mean, the challenging part is, I guess I didn't really understand the question that well.
When you're not setting up, when you're setting up for service, when it isn't service, when the customers aren't coming, and you can train people, hopefully, and they've got that sparkle to touch the customer the right way, to look them in the eyes, to really be tuned into their mood, their state, their order, their interest, their what have you. But, we all work a lot of hours if you're in the restaurant business, and folks come in a heck of a lot earlier than when the customers do. So how do you keep that culture of you're important, you're treasured, you're key, you need energy, you were hired for a purpose, we like you? How do you keep that going?
I think, first of all, we feed all our employees a meal. We call it family meal, and everybody sits down before the shift, and we give them a meal. And that's an opportunity for the chef and the manager to go over specials, to talk about things. Meanwhile, everybody's eating, and it's a small cost to the company. A lot of restaurants handle it differently, but we prefer to sit down all as a group to create sort of a family type feeling to it. We found it's really, really beneficial. The other thing is continued and ongoing training. Give them opportunities to taste wine, to taste food. Give them a story. To me, stories are like one of the most valuable things that you can grab onto and be able to take that information from that story and then share it with the guest. And, one of the big trends today is authenticity and being real and, farm to table. And you go a little bit too far with it, You
don't need to meet the chicken.
Right. This
Right.
is, you don't have to name the butter, from the cow it came from. Right. But there are ways where you can tell a great story. And, I'll never forget, my brother years ago told me about a wine. It was called La Crema Christi, and, the Tears of Christ. And it's grown on a mountain slope on Mount Vesuvius. And, by telling that story, you immediately are interested in that wine, and you want to order it. Right. And so everything comes with the story. And if you can talk about that, it creates a connection. We look for breadcrumbs that the guest leaves behind. And that's how you connect emotionally with the guest. Looking for a breadcrumb, looking for an opportunity to create a relationship, an emotional connection with that guest. And like you guys, you have the benefit. I may see a guest 2 or 3 times a year. You have the opportunity of seeing them, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week.
A day. Yeah.
Which gives you more opportunity to play devil's advocate to screw up, too. I mean, well, I don't mean that in a bad way, but
it's a game of odds.
There are lots of restaurants, but as many restaurants as there are, it seems like there'll never be as many more cafe. I mean, there's just, there's coffee practically coming out of water fountains these days. I mean, it's everywhere. So for a guest to change their habit with you is even more fragile in some ways.
It is. And you're right, there are more and more competitors. But going back to, how do you maintain that culture? part of our mission statement is that everyone is a customer, and it talks about how we talk to each other before we ever unlock the doors, how we treat each other. And that resonates with that impacts how we treat our customers. So if we are kind to each other, and again, I know it seems a little Pollyanna, but it matters. If there's something heavy from the basement that I need to carry up and someone just says, hey, let me help you with that. And we treat each other well, and we talk about this a lot. We don't assume that we go over something in onboarding. It enters conversations daily with our teams. It drives decisions, and it's very, very important to us.
You guys do something very cool at one of your cafes where you put up your financials, kind of how different sectors are doing for everyone to see. And when I went in for a meeting and I saw it, I understood that, I thought that's investiture from your employees on a whole different level. Because it's, this is what the bakery ran. And here's when they turn their lights off, they save this much. And I mean, that's really powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, they understand that none of this happens without them and that they have an impact. And you talk about that with the customer too. I only have 30 seconds with you, but what I do in those 30 seconds has a huge impact. I teach customer service in a class that we give, and I read cards that I've gotten from people I've never met that say, I was having a really bad day, your team recognized that, they said, oh, what's going on? I explained to them I was going through a tough time. They were very gracious. And then when I came back the following week, they had all signed a card and said, we're so sorry about your cat. We don't have an SOP that says when someone tells you that they've lost a family pet, please get a card. This happened because they enjoy their work, they're empowered, and they're engaged with the customers.
Mm-hmm. I think the other way to keep that culture alive, when the lights aren't on, is for me to not be married to the specifics of the culture. Over the last decade at the SweetSpot, every time we have some staff turnover, our culture evolves. And at first, I was very opposed to the change of the culture. Well, this is my coffee shop, and I want it to be run the way I want it to be run. And it looks so different now than it did then.
And aren't you glad?
I am so glad. I'm very glad because it means I'm less married to the business, too. I don't have to be there monitoring everything every minute of the day. But so I am married to setting the standards for this is how our customers will feel when they leave the building, and this is how we will serve and our service standards. But the actual culture is developed by whatever staff we have at that time, and I really give them the leeway to develop that. The feeling at each of our cafes is very different from one another, and it's very different now than it was a year ago, 5 years ago, but the standard of service is the same. And this is very hard for, I think, any owner or manager. It was very hard for me. I'm kind of a control freak, but the more that I've let go, the more that I enjoy being there, honestly.
To me, culture, community is a synonym for homonym. What am I trying to go for here?
It's an M&M.
Another word for culture. If you create a strong community at each of these locations, and that's sort of the overlying theme of all of what we're saying today, if you create a community, a strong community that believes in what you're doing and what they're doing, and they're empowered to do what they can do, then you're going to create a community that will rise up if you're sick or you're tired or you don't want to be at work. No matter what that is, that community will all sort of rise together and everyone will do better.
There's one quote I want to leave you with, and then let's open this up for questions. But I found this. I think it's Joe Baum, the great restaurateur of Windows on the World and so many other restaurants. But he said, "Business is like life. It's all about how you make people feel. It's that simple and it's that hard." And I know a lot of you have your own restaurants and you have your own teams, and in many cases you're that one location, and it is that simple, but it is that hard because it's how you touch the folks that come in your door every day and choose your establishment over others. So with that, are there any questions for anybody on the panel? Please don't be shy. Yes, sir.
How do you keep that motivation and drive that culture in the back of the house?
So in part of our training program, I think it's really important when we hire for example, a front of the house employee, we run them through about 3 weeks of training, which is pretty lengthy amount of commitment. But the first week they spend really in the back of the house, and they actually work the line a little bit. They work elbow to elbow with some of our cooks, some of my chefs. They spend a full shift or a half a shift in the dishwasher area. They spend, 1 or 2 shifts at the bar, 1 or 2 shifts at the host stand, and they actually work a little bit or touch each department within the restaurant. So they have a unique understanding of how important that dishwasher job is. Without a dishwasher, the restaurant grinds to a halt, And
Yeah.
so we've all walked into busy restaurants at 7 o'clock and you can't even see the dishwasher because he's literally buried in place, And to your point, when you roll up your sleeves and help them out, that's a big deal. That's a really big deal. So, being inclusive, letting them taste some of that wine, letting them taste some of that food. There always has been, and there probably always will be, a little bit of this divide between the front and the back of the house. And I have always been aware of it. I've always been uber sensitive to it, and I've always tried to figure it out. And I don't have the perfect answer, but I think, along with the kitchen, you have to hire people who have commitment and passion. A line cook is not going to have the same sparkle as a bartender or a server because they're more into the craft. I don't know if that's a great answer, but it's a great question.
It's a credit.
Great question.
It's a credit to your and Paul's restaurant. It was years ago. We were filming in one of your fine dining locations, and there was a lull, and I walked up to a woman at the pastry station, and I said, "I don't know you. How long have you been in pastry?" And she said, "Oh, I'm not. I'm going to be a host." It was at the steakhouse,
Yeah.
and I had no idea you did this. And I said, "Well, what are you doing here?" And she said, "I'm training." And I thought, that's fantastic, because you'll never fling a dessert into the garbage, or you'll never not treasure something. You'll never, it changes the paradigm so much when you understand what it's like when that dishwasher is buried behind plates, and on and on. Anyone else to add?
Well, this isn't from Colectivo, but several years ago I worked at L'Etoile, and I trained all of their wait staff. And now that I'm thinking about it, I didn't even realize it, but I was training empathy because it's really hot in the kitchen. And I would say things like, we as servers are never going to come into the kitchen and complain about how hot it is out there. We will keep an eye on the water pitchers for all of our lines cooks. We take care of them because they take care of us. And I even asked them what the relationship was like at the last place that they worked. And I sort of set the stage and said, we're different. We're pretty special here. And it worked. And every once in a while, we'd all get together after work and have a drink. And the servers bought the back of the house drinks because they knew they made more money. And they were nice. And they said, thanks, you had my back when that recook came back twice. Appreciate it. So it's just, you have to set the stage for those cultural things, and you have to continue to communicate those things. You have an idea in your mind, but you have to live it every day and talk about it every day. We're very protective about our culture, and we do talk about it a lot to our coworkers, to our managers, because it's so important.
Another question?
I have a question. Maybe not so much in the larger communities, but like the smaller communities where we've got a pretty limited amount of workflow. And it happens in every industry, I'm sure. But I'd like to just get a feeling from each one of you. Like if somebody gets tired of waiting from someone, they go down the road, all of a sudden another restaurant goes, well, that's so you just tired of coming. How do you guys deal with that? How do you address that? Does it happen?
Did everyone hear the question? In essence, is in a smaller community, when you've got a restaurant and one of your employees gets hired away, and then there's some backlash, essentially. I don't. Yeah. When you lose talent and there's that type of competition, how do you handle that? And not kind words relative to the the job move, I guess.
Well, it's just, I feel your pain. It happens to us often, and it's poaching, and I think you have to wake up and look in the mirror every morning and know that, that's something that we don't do. As a company, we have a pretty hard line on soliciting other people's employees.
I would assume you want to create an atmosphere or a situation where you want to.
Well, that's part of it. They want to come to work for you, but
It does happen when people say those types of things, and how they feel.
So in a small community, our community is pretty small, I have made a point of befriending the other restaurant owners. And it's really important that we all stay in touch. So if I get an application from someone that listed a reference from one of my friends that owns a restaurant down the street, I call them right away. Say, hey, I received an application from so-and-so, what's the deal? Sometimes it's, I don't have enough hours for her. She's looking for 20 hours, go ahead. Sometimes it's, do not touch that, either I'm about to let that person go, or I like that person so much, if you poach them from me, we'll never speak again. I really think that befriending and staying in touch and recognizing that, of course, there's competition, but everybody can win, too. The more popular all of the restaurants are in a small community, the more the whole community can win. So I think being wary of the competition, but also utilizing that network for the good of all as well can be very helpful. And then making sure that you're the one that everyone wants to come to, instead of losing people to the other restaurants, which can be challenging, but I think that helps.
Any other questions? Yes, sir. And then we'll go to you, ma'am.
Well, during the interview process, to find people like sparkle or people like that shine, which like you to our what kind of what you guys can say, you think to say oh, this is the guy that I want behind the line or be my service. So the hint, because interview is just such a quick process that you need to read people and know the person a few minutes. So and you need to have a few points that you go and say, oh, okay, so this is the point. So what kind of advice you guys have for that part of the interview to say okay, so go for this because this is.
So I think the question is, what are the telltale signs, the questions you can ask in an interview that really alert you to this person's got the spark or the sparkle? Is that correct? Yeah.
So in our company, it's an at-will state. So, everybody's sort of on probation, and we don't hire 100% of the time. I mean, we do have some mishires. That does happen. Oftentimes, once they get within the culture itself sometimes pushes people out because they just don't feel comfortable. It's like when you take the last knife out of the silverware drawer and you say nothing to anybody. That's not a healthy culture. And there are people who have, done that, and they just don't fit in. I think if you're, you have the opportunity to fix a bad hire, but fix it quickly. Don't let that cancer into the door for too long if you really think it's not a great fit.
And actually, our interview process is not that quick. I think that we do a phone screen, we do a first interview, and we do a second interview. And we do check references. And I'm always amazed at what we hear at the references. I think that I've worked in concepts where they skip that stage, and you regret it. But the second interview, people often relax and they think, I've got this now. And in relaxing, they might show a little bit more of some attitudes or personality that wouldn't fit with your culture. But I look for people who smile at me first, and then I smile back. I can't teach you to smile. if I stand behind you and say, please smile, that's so annoying. Nobody's going to do that. So I've given up. I can't do that. So I want someone who has that spark, who's going to smile. I smiled at you, you smiled right back at me. That's great, right? What that nonverbal is. I used to have a GM that used to start the interview at one place and say, I'm having a hard time hearing you. Can we move over there? And they would move quickly. And if the person would follow quickly, they would see if they had energy. I don't do that, but
Wow.
I thought it was sort of interesting. When I used to choose line cooks, I would see how they worked in the dish station often, and that's where I'd start their training because I could see how organized they were and how neat they were and how fast they could work. So there's a lot of little things like that. You have to be a very careful observer because anyone can go on the internet and get the right answers. So there's a lot of nonverbal that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing is I think that you're never going to see someone better than you see them at their interview. People come to an interview prepared and ready, and that's the best you're going to get them. So if you don't want them in your restaurant after that, they're never going to show up better than that, I guess, is what I've learned. I mean, maybe they're a little nervous, maybe they'll be a little bit more outgoing, but if there's anything that's off to me, then I know it's only going to go downhill from there. And I think you just have to be you have to be picky. And I ask a lot of situational questions instead of tell me about your experience, instead of just asking them about their job experience, saying, tell me about a time that you had to deal with a difficult customer and how did you handle that situation? Or the question earlier, tell me what you're passionate about, and just really getting to know people. When I used to sit in the cafe and do interviews and then the person would leave, my behind-the-counter staff could always tell how it went by how long it took. If it was a 5-minute interview, they knew that person had no chance. But if it was a 20 to 30-minute interview, then they knew, okay, Lacey really enjoyed talking to that person, if they can make me laugh, if they can keep me engaged, and if I want to talk to them for 20 to 30 minutes, then I want to work with them. If it's 5 minutes, they're not going to cut it.
You have anything to add, my friend?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is the interviewing process is a two-way street. So if you're prepared and you know exactly the kind of person you're looking for and understand the job description, then you're going to be in a much better position to find that person.
Great, yeah. Miss, I know you had a question, then let's wrap up because I believe they need this room for something other than what we're doing here today. No, please.
We'll be here for a little bit, too.
We want to hear your question. We've got time. Come on. I insist.
I know, right. Well, if you have a situation, you hire somebody for a serving job. They're a great server, they do a great job serving. Well, you notice that they might have the qualities of being a manager. So you promote them to manager. Well, you see them doing their managerial duties, but some things start to tally up as, well, maybe they shouldn't be in managerial. How do you handle the situation of either putting them back down to server, or, I mean, obviously you have to talk to that person about what they want to do, because some of their managerial duties are not being met, and you've spoken to this person maybe a few different times. But how do you handle that situation to maybe bring them back down to that?
Did everyone in the room hear the question, the situation? Yeah, okay.
That actually happened recently with us. We had a server. We promoted into a manager. He did pretty well at that entry-level manager. We promoted him to a bigger unit, and he was really struggling. And it's a very tough conversation, but he knew he wasn't succeeding as well. So it's a mutual understanding. He had great value for us. We reassigned him to a different restaurant that was more suitable to his skill set. My situation is a little bit different, perhaps, than yours. We didn't want to terminate him because he was a great guy and he had everything that we wanted. It was just the wrong fit. And sometimes, we make mistakes, In a single unit where you promote somebody, it's really hard, I think, to make him a server again. because now he's failed at a manager job, and he may or may not have the respect of the employees. It's a tough call on that one. We can move him to different restaurants.
So you're going to have to expand. There you go.
Yeah, buy another restaurant.
Yep. Duh.
Well, this is, with any coworker that is not performing well, when you sit down to have that final conversation, there's nothing in there that's going to be a surprise because you've been showing them all along where they're not meeting expectations. And I think that oftentimes where we are now, we don't even get to that final conversation because they understand that this isn't a good fit for them. They know we value them, we promoted them, we trained them, we did everything we could. So what might be a better fit? And I think those people really appreciate those honest conversations too. Like, what else can we do here? Because you were a rock star when you were a server, and maybe you're a server and you have some additional responsibilities as well. If you're able to do that, it's maybe a compromise in that as well.
Well, thank you, folks. If you enjoyed this, if this was helpful, or you have any other feelings, let the Restaurant Association know. They've got comment cards. You can send them an email. I want to thank my panel members for taking time out of your professional days. Some of you drove across Hilldale in the state to be here. We're very grateful. And thanks, everyone. Have a great show.